Today is my first day home after spending a little more than a week in California and Colorado, where we celebrated my wife's ordination as a rabbi and then spent a few days with my parents, my siblings, and my grandparents. It has been almost exactly 1 year since we were back in Colorado last, and now my little girl is significantly more aware of her surroundings. She is filled with questions and desires, and most of all, opinions. And in the house that I grew up in, like many of your own homes, I would imagine, there are hallways and there are shelves that are filled with photographs. And my parents have impressively, one might even say artfully, curated one of these hallways and turned it into a time machine. When you start walking down it, on the left-hand side are the most recent pictures of the grandchildren. And then there's some wedding photos of myself and my siblings, and then some high school graduation photos, and then family photos from when I was young, and then photos of my younger sister when she was born, and then wedding photos from my parents, and then finally photos of myself and my oldest siblings when we were itsy-bitsy. It is, like I said, just a little time machine, a retrospective of our family that takes you from just moments ago, as there is quite literally a digital frame getting live uploads day by day, moment by moment, right until the earliest possible photos of us. And these photos, both the ones that were on the wall and the ones that were strewn about the house, fascinated my little girl. "Who's that?" she would say, pointing at a kitchen fridge magnet from a bat mitzvah that happened 20 years ago. "That's Auntie Alyssa." "Who's that?" at a picture of the various Kaye men at another simcha hanging on the wall. "Well, that's me." "No." "That's Saba." "And that's my Uncle Norman, and you have a part of his name." "Who's that?" On and on. And so I told her a little bit about the people in the photographs, my family, our friends, and both the living and the dead. It is my family, and it is her family, after all, and I want her to know who those people are. And in our Torah portion this week, God commands Moses to take a census, to count the people of Israel. And it occurred to me that a census is only required once you graduate, as it were, from being a family into being a nation, into being a people. A family doesn't require a census. Even with a large family, you know your names, and you know the stories, and you know the relationships that bind you together. More than once, for instance, I have turned to Rabbi Splansky and I have said, "How does so-and-so know so-and-so, or how are they related?" And she has, without ever missing a beat, explained to me the complicated lineage of cousins and marriages which bind the Toronto Jewish community and the greater Holy Blossom Jewish community together. We know those stories. And when I lived in Israel, I studied with an Orthodox rabbi named Levi Cooper, and Rav Levi is a brilliant lecturer on the Gemara and Hasidus and Rambam, but perhaps his greatest point of pride was that his bubby would still come to his classes once a week. "Hello, bubby," he would say. "Do you have a good seat, bubby? Can you hear me, bubby?" he would ask throughout the lecture. And once, as she went to leave the classroom, he turned to his students and he said, "Bubby has almost 150 great-grandchildren, and she knows all of their names." And not long ago, I was visiting a congregant for Shiva, and they showed me an album which was commissioned for a family reunion. And on the front was a married couple who had left one country and come to Canada. And on their back were their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, 30 plus and growing strong. And in my mind, I hear my little girl's voice, and she goes, "Who's that?" And I know that I may not actually be able to answer those questions for someone else's family when I'm looking at those photos. But there is someone who almost certainly can. Because, like I said, a census is not something that a family requires. But it is something that a nation needs. And as our Torah continues, especially as we transfer into the final books of Bamidbar and Devarim, it is becoming very clear that the Israelites are no longer a family. They are a confederation of clans. They are a nation. They have become a people, which is why the book of Bamidbar, perhaps more than any other book of the Torah, truly marks a change, a fundamental change in the narrative and the story of the Jewish people. Bereshit, Genesis, is a book that is ultimately about family. Explicitly, we begin with a couple. We see the destruction of the world through the eyes of one small family, that's Noah and his clan. Then we return to our ancestors, Abraham and Sarah. We share their anxiety and their fear that their family will not continue to exist. And then each subsequent generation, child by child, is explored and celebrated in Torah, the dramas of the siblings, their rivalries, which culminates in the great family of Jacob, 70 human beings who descend to dwell together in Egypt. And Shmot, Exodus, is a book that also begins with family. Because while the Israelites have become a great and mighty nation to the point where counting them is nearly impossible, our story is still just focused on one small family inside of one clan, which is Moses and his siblings, his miraculous saving, his growth, his escape, his calling to serve as God's prophet, his return, his questions. Can I lead this people? Will they accept me? Will they follow me? The first half of the book of Exodus is grand, and it is cosmic. It is a universal story of revelation, but it is also deeply intimate. And perhaps nowhere do we see that more than at Mount Sinai, which is a moment of transcendental societal shifting and is also appropriate for each individual soul. Sinai marks the moment where we transcend from family to something else. And in that second half of the book of Exodus, in the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus, it is a priestly manual, which is deeply focused on the nature instructions for serving God. And so, having completed those three books, when we finally arrive at the book of Bamidbar, like we do this weekend, when we arrive at the book of Numbers, when God demands a census, we can tell that actually this is something that has been built up to. It is the natural progress where the Torah has been leading us. And the problems and the issues that Moses will face in the book of Numbers are not anymore the problems of a family. They are the problems of a nation. They are the issues of war. They are the issues of justice. They are the issues of faith. They are the issues of rebellion and insurrection, of challenging authority and on passing on institutionalized leadership. A census, that great call to account for your people, is our signpost that we are in the story of a family no longer. We are in the story of a people, of a nation, of a kingdom to be. And yet somehow we, the Jewish people, we can't help ourselves. We always move back to being family. It is a calling and an identity we can never deny. That somehow, no matter how, no matter where, we always just find each other. We're bound together. We're more than just co-religionists. Avram Infeld, one of the great Jewish educators alive today, likes to tell this story. He says, in New York City, there is a bank, a very successful bank, and it was once called Chase Manhattan Bank. And they had a slogan that every kid in New York knew: you have a friend at Chase Manhattan. Well, a well-known Israeli bank opened up in New York, and they came up with their own slogan. You may have a friend at Chase Manhattan, but we're mishpacha. We're family. And family, as I thought to myself earlier this week, family doesn't need a census. We know who we are, and we know each other's stories. So Ken Yehiratzon, may that continue to be God's will. And may it continue to be the truth of our people, that we balance this great task of being a nation and a people, and also thoroughly knowing who we are and how we fit together as we continue this great, challenging, and blessed work of being a family.